All right. So if you, let's see. So if there's something wrong with the video, you can't hear it, you need to write in the chat immediately. I'll keep an eye on it. But basically, I'm going to play this video. We're going to answer some of the questions as we go through it. So this is a review. This is what's called an oversimplified video, which means that we're taking a very complicated situation like the start of the Civil War and kind of breaking it down in a very quick way so we can get started with the curriculum a little bit later. All right, so if you take a look at the first question, it says, what was the major states' rights issue that was causing all this conflict throughout the United States? Okay, so what was causing this conflict? So we're going to watch the video, and then it should come up around that time. 2, what invention caused the rise of slavery in the South in 1793? So I'm going to go over the answers. I'll stop the video at times. If the video is hard to hear or something, please let me know immediately. All right, enjoy.
Link in the description down below. Okay, Mrs. Lincoln, this is it. One last push, and we're done. 9 months and 4 days ago, my father brought forth upon my mother himself and gave to her a child, conceived in a shack in Kentucky, and dedicated to the proposition that I will drink num-nums from a bottle and do little poo-poos in my pantses for the next 2 to 3 years. Now what is it babies do again? Oh yeah. I am not touching that. Abraham Lincoln grew up with his relatively poor family in Kentucky, eventually moving to Indiana, and finally, Illinois. He read a lot of books, worked a lot of jobs, wrote some questionable poetry, and finally entered the law profession. Despite being self-taught, he turned out to be a pretty clever and astute lawyer. In one case, a guy claimed he witnessed a murder at night, and Lincoln was like, "How could you have seen anything in the dark? There was a bright full moon." "A what?" "A bright full moon." "Can you say that again, please?" "There was a bright full moon." "A dim half moon?" "No, a bright full moon." "That's funny, because according to this almanac, there was a dim half moon that night, which makes you a liar." Well, I got a bright full moon for y'all right here. Now that's what I call a rebuttal. Lincoln and his cheekbones weren't only interested in law, however. He also dabbled in the world of politics, serving as a legislator in both local and national assemblies. And what a time it was. Not even 100 years after the Founding Fathers wrote, "All men are created equal," politicians were already asking, "Yeah, but what does that mean exactly?" "It means all men." "Yeah, but what does that mean exactly?" And not just that. States' rights versus the federal government. What are the executive powers of the president? Is cereal a soup? The Founding Fathers left some of these questions perhaps a little too open to interpretation. And the biggest question of them all was slavery, an ugly mark on what should have been a revolutionary new nation based on liberty and democracy. Thomas Jefferson had written a condemnation of slavery in the Declaration of Independence, but out of fear of losing Southern states' support, it was removed. Hey guys, do you think leaving this a little vague will create any unforeseen problems in the future? Cannonball! And those unforeseen problems were now beginning to rear their ugly heads. As the nation developed, the North and the South developed along two very different lines, and two very different cultural identities emerged. Northern cities began rapidly industrializing, while the southern climate allowed for large plantations of labor-intensive crops. As a result, one half of the country didn't rely on slaves, while the other half had become economically dependent on them. In 1793, Eli Whitney's cotton gin caused the slave trade in the South to explode, while in the North, a growing abolitionist movement was taking root. A general mistrust began to develop.
So as you see, I paused the video because we're going to go over questions 1 and 2. First off, Diego, could you let me know, was the video easy to hear and stuff? Excellent. Thank you, Diego. Okay, so number 1, what was the major states' rights issue that was causing all of this conflict throughout the United States? That's something we talked about yesterday. The major problem, for the correct answer, is going to be slavery. Right? Slavery is what's causing all of this problem. So you can basically put in your answer for number 1, that slavery was causing the issue. All right. Number 2, what invention caused a rise of slavery in the South in 1793? That was called the cotton gin. And the cotton gin was a tricky little device that made it easier to produce cotton from the crops that were being created, and that required a lot of slaves to work the cotton gin. So when the cotton gin was invented, we needed more slaves in the red states, if you can see the red states right now. So those would be the correct answers. We're now going to go look at questions 3 and 4 coming up now.
Between the North and the South, as Northerners felt the South were hell-bent on expanding slavery, and fear spread throughout the South that the North wanted to take their slaves away. In 1819, there were 11 free states and 11 slave states. A perfect balance. A happy medium. A harmonious relationship. Hey guys, nice to meet you. I'm Missouri, and I would like to become the 23rd state. Hey buddy, welcome to the nation. We'll be happy to accept you as a free state. Oh no, you don't? You're trying to get one over on us. Missouri's gonna be a slave state. Okay, listen, why don't we just ask Missouri what it wants to be, and we slave state. Well, then, allow me to introduce to you the newest, freshest state on the scene, Maine. Hey, you can't do that, and you can't have any more slave states above this line. What? The issue of slavery is solved, and it will never come up again. A few years later, it came up again. You see, as America expanded westward, each new state or territory that was added threatened to upend the delicate balance between the slave and free states. If one faction managed to outnumber the other, it could gain an easy majority and force its own ideals on the opposing side, leaving a...
So number 3 says, what did the free states get in response to Missouri becoming a slave state in 1819? So before the Civil War, you were either a free state or a slave state. The slave states and free states had an equal amount of states in our government. All right, so not one group was more powerful than the other. Missouri, this country, this state, wants to become a slave state. That's going to make the slave states more powerful than the free states, and that makes them very unhappy. So 3, what did the free states get in response to Missouri becoming a slave state? The free states got Maine to become a free state, which I have right there in the chat. And that is the answer to question 3. Now, this whole issue of, are you going to be a free state? Are you going to be a slave state? Like New York was a free state, but another state like Florida would be a slave state. So depending on which state you were, you got to be a free or a slave state. All right. So number 4, take a look at, and we'll answer the question shortly.
A huge portion of the population feeling spiteful and oppressed. For a while, compromises kicked the can down the road and kept the volatile balance in check, as new free and slave states were roughly added in pairs. But then one loudmouth state just had to barge in and ruin everything as usual. The addition of Texas saw the United States enter into a war with Mexico, which they won, gaining a huge amount of land out west and creating even more problems. Hey guys, nice to meet you. I'm California, and I would like to become the 31st state. Hey buddy, welcome to the nation. We'll be happy to accept you as a southern slave state. Oh no, you don't. You're trying to get one over on us. California is going to be a free state. Okay, listen, why don't we just ask California what it wants to be, and we can free state. Well, then, allow me to introduce to you the territories of New Mexico and Utah, able to freely vote for slavery themselves. Hey, you can't do that! And we can enter Northern Territory anytime we want to recapture escaped slaves. What? The issue of slavery is solved, and it will never come up again. A few years later, it came up again.
So number 4, what did the slave states get in response to California becoming a free state after the Compromise of 1850? So as you see here in the video, this is the Compromise of 1850. If you're looking at the picture here, you see what's called the Fugitive Slave Act. Now, the Fugitive Slave Act was something we did in the reading yesterday, and the reading talked about how if you escaped into the North as a fugitive slave, you had to be brought back into the South, and anyone that tried to help a fugitive slave can get thrown in jail. So that is something that made the slave states more powerful. Okay? Number 5 and number 6 we will do together. All right, so take a look at the questions, preview them, and then we will answer the questions.
In 1854, a Democratic senator from Illinois wanted to build a really cool choo-choo train here and proposed that the territories of Kansas and Nebraska be created open to slavery, even though they were clearly above the Missouri Compromise line. Obviously, the northern states were like, hell no. But the southern Democrats who controlled Congress at the time were like, well, if you love liberty and democracy so much, then you should let them vote on whether slavery should be legal or not. And so it was. Huge numbers of pro and anti-slavery settlers rushed to Kansas to sway the vote in their favor. And while they were all there, they began to beat the crap out of each other. One of those settlers was a man named John Brown, a former businessman who failed at just about everything he tried and went arguably insane. He was a radical abolitionist and dedicated much of his life to the Underground Railroad and freeing slaves. One night, in revenge for an earlier raid by pro-slavery forces, he and his sons killed a number of pro-slavery settlers in the territory, helping to kickstart years of violence known as Bleeding Kansas. Kansas and Nebraska both eventually voted in favor of outlawing slavery, but from here, the tension began to grow at a rapid pace.
What? You haven't played World of Warships yet? Why the hell not?
In 1852, author Harriet Beecher Stowe penned Uncle Tom's Cabin, a best-selling novel that exposed the terrible cruelty of slavery to the world. Oh, how awful. How morally corrupt a nation must be to allow such things to happen. Your Majesty, what should we do about all the starving children working in the coal mines? Nothing! In 1854, the Republican Party was formed, and Abraham Lincoln emerged as a leading figure. Southern Democrats viewed the new Republican Party with mistrust, believing it to be radical and abolitionist. In 1856, a politician named Charles Sumner gave a speech in Congress, calling out slave-owning Democrats with fiery language. If slavery was a woman, she'd be an ugly one, and the senator from South Carolina would like to boink her. Representative Brooks, do you have a rebuttal? Oh, I have a rebuttal, all right. Yeah, here's a rebuttal for you. Oh, come on. Surely this isn't allowed. I don't know. I'll have to consult the rulebook. I can't find anything about caning a political opponent, but it says here I'm not allowed to wear women's underwear. Uh-oh. News of the violence on the Senate floor took the nation by storm. Southern slave owners sent Representative Brooks new canes to replace his now broken one. And on the floors of Congress, politicians carried weapons in self-defense, which is never a good sign. In 1857, the Supreme Court ruled in the Dred Scott case that all people of African descent, slave or free, could not be citizens.
Okay, so number 5. What did Kansas, Nebraska eventually vote on doing with slavery? They said to outlaw slavery. And outlaw, Diego, means not allow. All right, that's 5. 6, what did Charles Sumner do to Preston Brooks? Okay, you saw what happened is in our government, they actually started beating people up. Okay, so they got beat up with a cane. Jane, I don't have you today. I don't have 886 today. I'll see you guys. Okay? All right, 7, 8, and 9 are coming up, so keep watching. 7 is, what did Abraham Lincoln mean in his speech? A house divided against itself cannot stand.
And therefore could not sue for their own freedom under any circumstances, undoing years of progress with the strike of a gavel. Now, within all of this bitter debate over slavery, there were many nuances. North versus South, Republican versus Democrat, states versus the federal government. But let's strip all of that away. For 4 million individuals living in America, this wasn't about political intrigue or party alignment. It was about the basic human right to be free. Men, women, and children were stolen from their homelands and brought to the American continent, where for generations they were considered to be property, forced to live in poverty, and work from sunrise to sunset. Plantation overseers did whatever they felt was necessary to get the most out of their slaves. Punishments were often barbaric. Families were regularly separated, and parents could often only watch, as their children were auctioned off, never to be seen again. Thousands of slaves took the treacherous risk of running away, and abolitionists in the North helped many escape via the Underground Railroad, as bounty hunters entered the North to chase them down. Leading figures within the abolitionist movement included many significant free black men and women. But it's important to note that for many of the anti-slavery white individuals in the North, opposition to slavery was often an economic issue, not a moral one. as many worried large plantations would take their lands and livelihoods away. Abraham Lincoln knew that slavery was a moral evil, and he regularly spoke out against it in powerful speeches that helped him rise through the ranks of the new Republican Party. He lamented at the hypocrisy of a great American nation meant to stand as a shining beacon of freedom, while also enslaving 4 million men, women, and children. He most famously declared in 1858 that a house divided against itself cannot stand, that one day, slavery in America would end. However, even Lincoln was cautious in his opposition. He didn't want to outlaw it entirely, but simply prevent its expansion, so that given enough time, he believed it would naturally die out. Thankfully, history would force his hand. In October 1859, one abolitionist
So number 7, what did Abraham Lincoln mean in his speech, "A house divided itself can't stand"? Basically, he meant that our country can't be half free, half slave. Because if you're half free and half slave, the country is eventually going to collapse. We need to have slavery in all of the states or no slavery in any of the states, which is probably a lot better. So he was saying we need to make that decision. All right, number 8, what was the South worried about when Abraham Lincoln was elected president?
decided he'd try to single-handedly take down slavery by force. Who would be crazy enough to even attempt such a thing? It's our good friend, John Brown. He planned to seize arms from an armory in the town of Harper's Ferry, free the slaves there, and continue south, inciting a major slave uprising along the way. A noble cause, a bad plan, and terrible execution. Brown's men took the armory and some hostages, but were quickly surrounded by one Robert E. Lee and his U.S. Marines. Brown was captured, and a couple of months later, he was executed for treason. Northerners sympathized with Brown, but Southerners were like, you see this? They're coming for us. Soon, there'll be 1 million John Browns. 1 million John Browns? What on earth are you thinking about? A John Brown farm? Yeah, me too. To make matters worse, new northern free states meant now the southern states really were outnumbered, and they were beginning to feel bitterly spiteful and oppressed. Further fear began to spread in the South when news broke that a relatively unknown figure had just secured the Republican Party nomination for president. Abraham Lincoln, mostly well-liked among anti-slavery Northerners, had made some of the most powerfully worded speeches against slavery of any politician at the time. And now, there was a chance that he and his cheekbones could become president. For the South, that would be too much. In the 1860 election, Lincoln's name didn't even appear on the ballot in 10 southern states. But much to their horror, when the final results came in, Lincoln had won by an electoral college landslide. Lincoln himself tried to calm their fear. How many times do I have to tell you, I'm not gonna take away your slaves? Yeah, right, Honest Abe. We've had enough of you Northerners. We're gonna go form our own country. You can't do that. Why not? Well, if you had won the election, would it be okay for us to leave? Of course not. Well, why not? Because that's not how victim mentality works. Many states felt that when they joined the Union, they always withheld the right to leave it whenever they pleased. Many people living in 19th century America often felt more.
Number 8, and then we have one more after this. Number 8 is what was the South worried about when Abraham Lincoln was elected president? That Lincoln would take away their slaves. Now, Lincoln was pretty much saying he wouldn't do that. He just wanted to stop the spread of slavery, just not have it grow. But a lot of the South didn't believe him. All right, let's find number 9, his last goal as president before the South secedes. And secedes means to leave the country and make their own country.
More loyalty to their state than to the nation. And now, with the South feeling like it had lost its voice in the federal government, they were out of here. South Carolina was the first to go, and over a period of 6 months, one by one, 11 slave states officially seceded from the Union, with just 4 contested border states opting to remain. The seceding states issued a number of official documents justifying their secession. South Carolina proclaimed that it was northern states' hostility to slavery that rendered the federal government illegitimate. Mississippi declared that their position was thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, and in a speech, the Confederate vice president stated that the new Confederate government rested upon what he called the great truth of racial inequality. Revered American generals such as Robert E. Lee opted to side with their states over the Union. And with all the chaos, one New York lawyer wrote that rather than a bald eagle, America's national bird should be a debilitated chicken. And hey, I kind of like that. One man, watching the crisis unfold, knew it would be his job to solve it. Lincoln was just about to hop on a train and become the President of the United States of America. Hey man, you're hella ugly. Grow a beard or something to hide that face. Good idea. Still ugly. With assassination plots already underway, Lincoln had to travel to Washington, D.C. under heavy disguise and protection. All along the way, he received stacks of threatening letters. May the hand of the devil strike you down. You are destroying this country. Damn you, every breath you take. Love from... Grandma? At his inauguration speech, Lincoln once again reiterated that no, I do not want to take away anyone's slaves. But for Lincoln, he did want to preserve the Union. He declared secession to be nothing but an illegitimate rebellion. In your hands, and not in mine, he said, is the momentous issue of civil war. You can have no conflict without being yourselves the aggressors. We are not enemies, but friends. It was clear Lincoln was ready and willing to get freaky and open up a can of Scatman John if he had to. Whether he had the support of the people, however, was in question. In the end...
All right, so that's where we're going to stop. Number 9. Lincoln's main goal was not to end slavery. His main goal was to preserve the Union, which means keep or bring the country back together. That was his main goal. And I'll just put here, keep the country together. Because what you're about to see is our country is about to falter and move away. So as you see, that's the first part of the assignment. At the bottom, I'm going to explain how to do that, but you're going to be on your own pretty much for the bottom. So I need to stop sharing one thing. I need to share something else. 1 second. Okay, so at the bottom here, Diego, you see the North and the South. So what happens is our country breaks apart, okay? As you kind of saw with the Civil War, we have the states here in red, right? We talked about the states in red are the slave states. They're the Confederate states. They're the states that had seceded and had slavery. They are no longer a part of the United States starting in 1861. The Union states are the states that did not secede and not have slavery. They are in this dark blue color. All right. So, well, what does that mean? Well, if we're going to learn about this war, we need to go over what was, each of these situations. Okay. So what we're going to do is you got to fill in the boxes that are missing. So you need to tell me the name of the country in the North and write it in. You need to tell me the name of the country in the South and write it in. All right, so what was the name of the South in the Civil War? So how do you do this? You could use Google. It's probably the best ways, or you could use any of the notes that you have from last year or this year to get the answer. So what was the name of the northern states during the Civil War? So you could type that in. What was the president's name of the northern states? What was the name of the president in the South? Did the North want to keep or get rid of slavery? I'm sure you know what a general is, Diego. A general is someone who leads the military. Who were the leaders of the military? In this case, I give you 8 names here, okay? Was Robert E. Lee a part of the South? Was he a part of the North? Was Ulysses Grant part of the South, or was he a part of the North? So go through each name and then go through it, because over the next couple of days and weeks, we're going to be looking at the war, and we're going to see a lot of these names. All right, so you're going to research these and pull them in, just as you see here. I'll do the first one with you. What was the name of the North during the, see, it even comes up right away, during the Civil War. So obviously people have asked this. You can either call it the United States, or what's the best answer is the Union. They were called the Union. And you do this for each of the countries. All right. So Diego, could you just write in the chat if you understand what you have to do? Excellent. Thank you. So you have 10 minutes. You can work on this. You should be close to finishing. So I want to mute myself so you can concentrate. All right. Best of luck. I'm here if you have questions.